At the request of Seth, we have other business on the agenda tonight. Discussion review of 2018 Warrant Committee session, and I think Seth had issues that came up over the year that he wanted to speak to and discuss.
I don't want to keep you any longer than possible, but I think that you're all entitled to at least hear one side of the story about the events that transpired this year. I'm not going to make a big claim, but I think we've heard a lot of one side of the argument. So I'm speaking as myself. As you know, I'm one of the 5 people who were singled out for investigation by the town council at their meeting earlier in the year. I think it was February 6th. And I'm not speaking for anybody else who was part of that. They're free to speak if they want to, but I'll make it brief. So I wanted to go back to the night of February 6th. There's like 2 dates that you need to keep in mind here. We've got February 6th, which was the first meeting where the town council raised this issue. And we've got March 20th, which was 2 weeks ago, where they basically concluded that, well, maybe the Warrant Committee's learned their lesson and there were no investigative findings or anything on this. But there's 2 dates here. So we started the season. Last year was a rough season. There were a lot of things. I think a lot of things were blown out of proportion, but the Warrant Committee was definitely, I felt, the target of a lot of attacks, for lack of a better description. I don't think any of them were founded, but they created a lot of noise and a lot of smoke that made the Warrant Committee look bad. And there was really very little recourse to respond to any of these. There was the fiasco with the nominating process, which, despite working well for 40 years, all of a sudden there's a conflict, and all sorts of allegations were made. Some of them I felt really over the top. There was also the question of conflict of interest, because one of our committee members happened to carry a petition in support of 13. So throughout the year we hear conflict of interest, appearance of conflict of interest. Conflict of interest has a very specific definition in our ethics ordinance. It's a quid pro quo. It's cash for favors. We had a person who was acting in a political capacity. But all of this stuff goes away. Once the season ends, it just sort of dissipates and everybody looks the other way. So this season starts on February 6th with the town council making an announcement that they have grave concerns that certain members of the Warrant Committee or citizens serving on the Warrant Committee are actively working behind the scenes to influence the decisions taken by this committee, meaning us. Somehow that there are 5 members, which turned out to be 5 of us, were conspiring to influence all of you in your decisions regarding 13 and 14 when those issues came before us. Now, there's no doubt that there were members on this committee, myself included, at varying levels of agreement that were involved with 13. I was sympathetic to 13. I voted for 12 in both votes that we had, but I felt that the citizens had taken initiative. They put a petition out there. I signed a petition. I don't think there's anything wrong with signing a petition. At some point in the season, I also attended a couple of meetings after the Warrant Committee had concluded, just to hear what was going on, to get an update, to hear what citizens were saying. I didn't try to influence a vote. I didn't talk to anybody. I didn't lead a discussion. I asked questions about people on everything from dredging to environmental pollution to traffic. I mean, there were any number of people at these meetings. That's all I want to say about the meetings. But at no point in those meetings was I conspiring with Warrant Committee members or representing the Warrant Committee. I was there as a citizen. So we start this year with an investigation. The day after February 6th, there's a notice all of us received from the town manager compelling us to deliver documents to the town council. The basis for these documents, really the basis for this whole grave concern, really this is the key document that they're relying on. And this was delivered to the town as part of the discovery documents requested from John Eno. Now, John Eno was a former member of this committee, and after he left the Warrant Committee, or after the season had concluded, he joined the lawsuit of certain citizens who are challenging Article 12, the creation of the ferry terminal. So John was required to provide a number of emails. I think he provided something like 450 documents in his possession. This was one of the documents that was delivered to the town. Now, anybody I spoke to, nobody knows where this came from. It's clearly meeting notes. There are three salient points, really. The first is at the top of the page. You'll see that the date of the meeting is April 17th. There are also, I'll talk about the date in a second, but there are further down highlighted, you'll see that there are two warrant committee members highlighted, Jake and Donna. Now, I'm assuming that these are active meeting notes, so you can conclude that Jake and Donna were there at the meeting. But that's two warrant committee members that could be construed as even being at this meeting of citizens. You go down to the next page, top of the next page, there is a reference to Jonathan Eno. It says, need to invite to the group John Eno and Tom Burton. John Eno is clearly not at that meeting if these are active meeting notes. This is a group meeting in April that has decided that John Eno needs to be invited. He's not at the meeting, and arguably he's not a member at this point. At best, we have two members of the warrant committee. This is the source of grave concern, right? Grave concern to me is embezzlement, manipulating the voters, whatever, but this is the basis for launching the investigation. Now, the key thing about the date is that this meeting occurred on April 17th. We had our last vote on this issue on March 27th. We were done. We had voted on 12. We had voted on 13. I think we rejected both of them. I happened to vote for 12, and I voted for 13, right? But this is the matter is no longer before us, and I'm not going to render a legal opinion as to how the open meeting law is interpreted. You're still a member of the warrant committee, but the issue that is being discussed is out of your hands. It's now on the ballot in front of the voters. Forgive me, I'm kind of following my own notes here, which is a mistake. And the council admitted as much. So in their meeting this year of 313, they were up here and they were discussing the emails that had been turned in by me, and they were referring to this, and they said to the town councilor, town attorney who's sitting right there, we still need to find out whether this is an issue, whether the fact that, assuming there were 3 or more people at this meeting, and there weren't, we need to find out whether it's even an issue because it's no longer before the warrant committee. I mean, to me, that's just sloppy. You've launched this investigation. You've sullied the reputation of the warrant committee, cast into doubt whether we're voting fairly and looking out for the interests of the town, but yet you haven't even answered this fundamental question before you launch an investigation. So leave that as it may. The investigation has started. The request for documents goes out. There is not a single member of the warrant committee who refused to provide their documents. Nobody said point blank, we're not cooperating. Everybody said, and I'm generalizing here, but to a T, everybody said, I've received your request. I would like clarification. What is your authority to be investigating the warrant committee? You are the town council. You are obviously the highest elected body in the town of Bar Harbor. But although we have absolutely no power, we are an elected body. The town charter, I believe, strongly suggests that if you have a conflict of interest or a violation of the open meeting law, you have 2 recourses. You convene an ethics commission, or you notify the Attorney General. The Attorney General is the body that usually takes care of open meeting law violations. You don't impanel your own committee and compel documents. And every member basically said, what is your authority? I've received your notice. I understand your concern, but show me your authority. There was no response to that. Cornell Knight is in the paper saying we probably don't have the authority. I'm paraphrasing, but he basically said, well, we're not sure. So everybody was at least willing to cooperate, provided that the authority was extended. I actually provided my documents when the due date came, and my decision to do so was simply this. I don't recognize the authority of the town council to investigate us. That should go to an ethics commission or the attorney general, but I could interpret the request for documents as coming from Cornell. That's what I chose to do. I said as much in my response. I said, I've received your request. I'm going to treat this as a freedom of access request from you. These are all of my documents. I provided something like 67 emails to the town, which, they jumped and began to analyze. But hold that thought. I think this could have been, the investigation could have been handled differently. If there are general grave concerns, if your concerns were so grave, you have two choices right away: Ethics Commission, Attorney General. Those two bodies are very important for a couple of reasons. These charges have civil liability. So there are penalties. There's, I'm an attorney. I have to report to the bar. These are not things to fool around with. And when you have an Ethics Commission or you have the Attorney General, there is a record that is kept. There is a record of the evidence that is presented against you, your responses. It is available. It goes up the chain of command as you go from Superior Court to the Appeals Court to the Supreme Court if it gets that far. There was no record being kept here. It was pretty clear to all of us, and there was no record. Also, the matters are kept confidential until a decision is made. There was no effort to keep any of this information confidential. Okay, this went from the town council to the Eno documents were placed on the town website. All of the discovery documents were released. The emails, addresses, telephone numbers of citizens who had reached out to, whether it be to John Eno or had been communicating in and amongst themselves, were all released. They were taken down 3.5 days later, okay, out of a good faith gesture. But it's pretty clear there was a lot of heat brought to bear on the town to take those records down. But those records ended up on Facebook. And the discussion on Facebook went south real quick. There were sitting town councilors, okay? These are people who have chosen to be investigators of my conduct, Jake's conduct, John's conduct. They are leading discussions on Facebook, reaching, answering questions of law, questions of fact, basically steering the public to reach conclusions that we were violating open meeting laws, that we had committed violations of the ethics ordinance. This is not an investigation. This is at best, it's a kangaroo court, what was convened here. That should have been all kept confidential, but it wasn't. So, again, what I believe we saw here was, as Councillor Friedman referred to himself on the March 6th meeting, this was a continuation of the war on the Warrant Committee that began last year and resumed this year, coincidentally, right at the start of budget season. Those were his own words, the war on the Warrant Committee. And for no other purpose, I think, more than just a pretext to support the vote to convene a charter commission. That is my own opinion. I'm convinced that that's the case. If you look at our actions, our votes, our attendance, there is nothing to fault the Warrant Committee for in its actual duties. We have made some opinions. We have raised some questions. Last year was a heated year, no doubt, but I don't think that anybody can point to any of the work that we did and said that we hadn't done our duty. We are, in large measure, a review body, and we, as 22 members, bring a lot of perspective, a lot of differences, a lot of opinions that are within the community to bear in our work. We are not expected to walk in lockstep with the town council, although I think it's fair to say 97% of the stuff they send to us, we approve it. Did we overstep? I mean, what was the term? We exceeded the scope of our authority by perhaps raising money for outside agencies? Maybe. I don't think so. But that, that was a charge that was leveled at us. Did we exceed the scope of our authority by questioning the vacation rental policy? I don't know, but there was a lot of heat that came back from those questions. All we asked was that you simply raise the fee that you charge people who run vacation rentals. So, I see it as a continuation of this battle. John and I saw it last year when we met with the town council to discuss changes to the Warrant Committee. It was very clear to me that the end result should be they want to turn the Warrant Committee into a budget committee. They want to reduce it from 22 people to 6 people. Maybe they're appointed, maybe they're elected, but the input that you get from the community with 22 people, as cumbersome as it is sometimes, would be removed from the table. That, I think, is the end result. We gave them a perfectly good proposal to keep the Warrant Committee going in its current form, updated for modern considerations of electing people. It was rejected. Those proposals that we gave to them were based on their recommendations and feedback to us in our one-on-one discussions. It wasn't something that we just cooked up. They told us they wanted to see turnover. They wanted to see more accountability. We gave them that. We broke it down to 21 members. We had people running 777 a year. Everything they wanted, shut down. So, again, I don't want to keep you here too long, but the thing I think that bothers me more than anything else is the discussion that really went online on Facebook at this. Once those documents were released and the discussion was allowed to continue, there were any number of attacks. I mean, we saw a repeat of the gender discrimination attacks, allegations from last year's nominating committee. I mean, I take that more personally than anything else, and I'm going to look every woman here in the room tonight and say that in conducting our nomination of candidates for this committee, particularly when John and Michael Blythe and I were responsible, we never engaged in gender discrimination. I mean, that's a civil and a federal, state and federal offense. But to just throw that around in a self-serving manner to attract attention and undermine the Warrant Committee is to me ridiculous. But there it was. It was out online again this spring. There were allegations that we only pick people that we know. These are all made by one person, by the way, but I'm not going to stoop to tell you who's saying this. There was another allegation by this same person that they sat in the Warrant Committee with a person who was insinuating this person is so stupid that they didn't know that they were elected, right? This just went on and on. But of course, the problem being under investigation is that you can't appear before the town council at a meeting and rebut what they're saying because you're not allowed to speak to agenda items or pending litigation. So no matter what was said the week before, I can't show up at a town council meeting and say, that was wrong, that was wrong, that was a misrepresentation. I'm not allowed to speak. The other consequence is that I can't say anything online because there are potential civil liabilities here, and those can be held against me, which is why I'm being careful, hopefully, about what I'm saying here tonight. You're in an awful position. You can't respond legally or procedurally, but you just have to sit there and take it. So we fast forward to the end of the March 20th. Well, actually, I want to back up. Just on March 6th, the town council is saying, well, we didn't get any responses from that request that Cornell put out to people. Cornell asked for documents. Only Seth Libby responded. We need to consider executing a proper Freedom of Access Act. That act can be made by any citizen. It can be made by any person. Actually, you could walk up to me on the street and say, Seth, I want to see your emails for the last 2 years as a Warrant Committee member. And I would have to give those to you. There's no question that we were all aware of the FOAA requirement, but we were not initially presented with an FOAA request. We were compelled to provide documents as part of an investigation. On March 20th, the town council decided that they would issue a proper FOAA request. The town attorney was right there. He said, yes, make the request. I want the request made on behalf of the town councilors and I want it made on behalf of Cornell Knights. So it's a personal request from Cornell, and it's a request from the committee as a whole. Almost to a T, within a week, which we have 5 days to respond, every member of the General Government Subcommittee, I'd already responded, had agreed to supply the documents. The documents were forthcoming. So in the case of John Eno had provided all of his documents as part of discovery. So from the beginning, there's been this continual argument that John Eno has not provided his documents. He did provide his documents. John Eno did not choose not to comply. He provided them. Now, John can speak for himself, but you heard the town saying, well, John Eno hasn't complied. John Eno did comply. He gave all of his documents. But after the town made a formal FOA request, every member said, I will provide the documents. There was one exception, and that person said, look, I've read the law. I've reviewed all of my emails. I have no documents that meet your requirements. It was one of the 5. All the rest of us had agreed to provide. So they were forthcoming. The town would have the documents that they believed would so clearly support grave concerns, right? Because remember, go back to February 6th. So this investigation has been bumping along. They've had no documents except mine to go with. After the March 20th meeting, those documents were forthcoming. Everybody agreed to reply to them. The March 6th meeting is when they made the formal FOA request. So, it was during that meeting that Councillor Friedman, who wrote a wonderful letter last week, I'm all in favor of working closely with the town council. I don't think that in the time that I've served, we've ever said anything negative about the town council. We've never singled out a town councilor for criticism or criticism. I think we've always been civil. I mean, even last year when we opposed stuff that they had brought to us, we were very deferential in saying, well, we recognize that the planning board has put a lot of hard work into this, and we're sorry to have to do this, but we have this problem. Or the town council wants to do this, but we have these objections. I don't think that we've ever been disrespectful or not appreciative of the role that they have. But, sorry, I lost my train of thought. But so Councillor Friedman wrote a very nice letter, and I agree with that. But just 2 weeks earlier, he's sitting in a town meeting talking about the FOA request, and this really baffled me. He said, well, if they don't provide the documents, maybe they're like Donald Trump. They've got something to hide, right? Now, I don't know, depending on your political view, the more offensive part of that could be being compared to Donald Trump. But the point is that there were a lot of reasons why those documents weren't initially forthcoming. Primarily, the town council does not have the authority to interview or to interrogate the Warrant Committee. There are 2 bodies that handle that responsibility. But the second thing he said after the fact was, even if they provide the documents, they're going to withhold anything that's self-incriminating. And the council laughed, right? Like, okay, so I in good faith gave you all of my documents, but you all sitting here with the town attorney right there are basically saying, well, yeah, Seth gave us documents, but we didn't find anything that supported our case in there, so he must have withheld self-incriminating documents. I mean, so I'll just call that the Friedman paradox. You're damned if you give the documents, and you're damned if you don't. If we don't find anything incriminating or that supports our case, we're just going to conclude and tell the town that you probably withheld it. I mean, I'm not even going to go to where that could lead, but they made a decision, so they executed the FOA. Everybody agreed to provide it. At the last town council meeting, everything ends with a whimper. We have the town council standing up saying, well, we're not going to pursue legal action to compel compliance with the FOA freedom of access request that we made. There was no need to. Everybody, to a T, had said the documents are coming. That was a way to sort of step away from the investigation and try to put this thing to rest. All of the information was coming. You could have had everything that you wanted and actually concluded your investigation and reached some sort of conclusion that would, I believe, absolve all of us of any sort of grave concerns, or maybe give you something that would support your case, but they didn't. And I'm very frustrated with the way that they just sort of handled this. They want to say, well, there's nothing there, and the Warrant Committee members have learned a lesson about open meeting law. I am very cognizant of the open meeting law. I'm very cognizant of my role as a Warrant Committee member whenever I go to public meetings or meetings of people, citizens. I'm the first to identify that I'm a member of the Warrant Committee, but that I'm attending the meeting as a private citizen, and that I'm not here to represent the Warrant Committee or to advocate for a position of the Warrant Committee. I do that pretty consistently, so I'm comfortable saying that that's my sort of go-to approach. But the conclusion 2 weeks ago to me was very unsatisfying, and I believe it is sort of a reflection of the town council realizing that they have probably moved into deeper waters than they expected, and they want this to go away. I don't know if it's going to go away. But I think what I wanted to say here tonight to you folks is that, first of all, I would like to apologize that any of my actions as a Warrant Committee member, whether reaching out to people who have a point of view that's different from the Warrant Committee, to listening to their point of view, to receiving emails from citizens who are members of groups that oppose positions taken by the town council. You know, we're not talking bomb throwers, we're not talking anarchists, we're talking tax-paying regular citizens who just happen to disagree. And to the extent that I meet these people, I say, you know, keep me informed. I want to know what you're thinking. I want to know what your positions are. So there's any number of emails where my name will show up with other people, other members of town government. Doesn't mean that I'm in a meeting. It doesn't mean I'm advocating a position. But I want to apologize to you folks that this sham is too strong of a word, but this kabuki theater of an investigation tarnished the reputation of the Warrant Committee and the hard work that all of you do as members of the Warrant Committee. I'd also like to give you my assurance that based on my understanding of the law and my review of all of my conduct, I did not violate the open meeting laws of the state of Maine, nor did I violate the ethics ordinance of the state of Maine. And I'm pretty sure from your own hopeful recollections, I did not corner any of you and urge you to vote one way or the other on 12 or 13. I mean, if you go back and review the meeting of 12 and 13, there was very little discussion. You know, and unless you guys were joining us in secret meetings where we were all coordinating our vote, there was no opportunity to do that. I mean, I take this job very seriously. I like serving the citizens of Bar Harbor, and I want to work with the town council. But I think that there are times when we disagree, and we should not be punished for disagreeing with the town council. And I happen to believe that this was simply a way to punish us and to create a pretext for the Charter Commission, which I do not think is necessary. And again, in short, I want to thank you for your time, but also want to apologize that, you know, somehow, you're on the Warrant Committee, you know, you're a member of the Warrant Committee, you know, it really is just baffling. So thank you. I apologize for keeping us here longer than necessary.
You know, I've only lived here 26 years, so that's really not very long. But I was on the appeals board a long time ago. For years, it seemed to me that many people who served, probably because they had the time to, were of the same age, close in age. They were of the same, you know, sometimes a mixed business or citizen background or whatever. But it seemed to go like that, probably because, like I said, and I said this online, I wasn't a warm body here because I was raising my kids. Now I've found the time to be able to contribute. Rosemary could say the same thing. Those of you who are younger, thank you. Christine could say the same thing. We now have time to partake. I've never seen a more varied mix of people come to do this voluntarily. Age-wise, gender-wise, and every other way.
Absolutely.
And with commitments that they have to the town or don't have to the town. I always thought my best and highest use was the fact that I have no financial involvement in any business anywhere in this area. Our paycheck comes from out of town, and we're basically permanent tourists here in that term. We get our money from elsewhere and spend it here. And so I can speak for people who may be embroiled in a business here that has another, thing, or is obliged somehow and maybe feel they can't speak. They might lose their employment. So I always felt that was like my only value. So when I saw the thing in the paper, I said, okay, well, I'll go over to the town office and sign up and see if, whatever. But what upsets me is that I think that, and what what I agree with totally, is the number of people. You look at every one of these people and I see 30 more people behind them, all the people they know, the information they can get word of mouth wise, especially from older people who may not be doing social media stuff or whatever. But we hear a lot more with this number of people's opinions, which I think, gee, you need that to run a town. 3 people, 6 people, I'm sorry, but you need that input, and it needs to be sort of a direct thing. I feel we have value not only looking over the budget, but some of the questions we ask. Yeah, why isn't this charging more, or blah, 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 whatever our recommendations are. But a lot of that came from outside of this room and these people. It came from friends of theirs or people who are asking questions. The more the merrier. I'm sorry that's what I believe, and I certainly hope we don't entertain some sort of other form of doing it. That's all.
Okay.
Thanks for listening. Sorry. I get riled.
I'm another one of the General Government Subcommittee. I happen to be the chairman. I received the demand from Cornell. I replied to him, and I said, referring to the time span that he wanted all this information, all the emails, written, telephone calls, Twitter, Facebook that you have or might have had. Notice that had. If I had it, I don't have it. So forget it. I wrote back to him and I said, I've received your notice. I am unable to comply with the time part that you've got on it because I am involved right now, as you know, with the budget for the town of Bar Harbor. And I have a duty as an elected person, a responsibility to review the budget. And I don't have time at this time to go through and furnish what you're asking. As a result of that, he told the council that I refused. He told the newspaper I refused. I have now come to the end of our deliberations. And the word I think Seth is in the Freedom of Access Act is when deliberations are over. And our deliberations were over with our last meeting last year. Our deliberations are over now. We've set our bit, we've shot our wad, that's it. I have gotten another demand from Cornell. I replied again, saying that I am still involved with the Budget Committee, the Warrant Committee's responsibilities, and I will be able, when we have finished our deliberations, to now see what you're talking about. I have not gotten back to him yet. I am working now on replying to that and furnishing what he's asking because he has not told me that this has been dropped. As far as I am concerned, what I read in the paper that has been dropped is in the paper. I don't believe everything I read in the paper. So as far as I'm concerned, this is still alive, and I'm still getting abused. I am told that I am not cooperating. I have been said that I have had secret meetings, unannounced meetings. I have not. I will go through what I have. I will review first the CD that Cornell sent to me when I requested what he's talking about. And I will see what he's talking about, and on the basis of that, I will reply to him and deliver to him what I can that applies. But be aware that what happens after we end our deliberations is none of his business. Because I am no longer deliberating or able to influence anybody. I have stood up for what I think is right since 1963, when I gave my teeth to the police of Selma. I will continue to stand up for what I think is right. When I had used my reasoning to deny what the town council wants, it is because something was wrong with the process or the product only. I have no desire, I have no conflict of interest. I live on Social Security. I get my money from the federal government. Not much of it, but that's where I get my money. And I'll be glad to tell anybody where I get my money. I am, like Seth, ripped at the way the town council has ended this. To say, well, I guess the Warrant Committee or the General Government Subcommittee has learned their lesson. They'll be more careful about holding an unannounced meeting. I think they have stopped this because they realize they are full of shit. I'm sorry.
Yes, please.
I apologize. I will continue until I am told that this is over, officially, legally, and not in the newspaper. Thank you.
We do have the planning board meeting scheduled for 7 tonight.
Yeah.
So we're going to have, but if we have something brief, we can wrap it up.
My main concern is freedom of speech. To what extent are citizens allowed to talk, to meet, to publish, to social media, and express opinions, try to organize other people, and it strikes me there's an incorrect or an imprecise definition of meeting that a bunch of the people in this room go to a concert or an open meeting and sit around and listen to whatever's going on. Does that constitute a meeting of the Warrant Committee? That is obviously silly. And so that at least that definition needs to go into law. And it strikes me there also needs to be an acknowledgement that whatever this is, I tried reading through it, doesn't make sense, is a product of free speech. People are entitled to do that, and God bless them that they care enough about the town to engage in those discussions.
Julie?
One really quick thing that has nothing to do with what we were just talking about. I just want to thank John and Seth. John for moderating for, 5 years? Thank you, John. Seth, secretary.